Hello and welcome back. I'm Denny with Denny's Sweet Oasis, and thank you for joining us today as we learn how to make cake pops. The request to make the cake pop tutorial video came from one of you guys, so be sure to remember that if you have any areas with baking that you struggle with or that you're just really interested in learning more about, then be sure to let us know in the comments so that we can make videos for you. Before we make our cake balls, we first need to decide what flavor we want to make. I've already decided that I would like to make dark chocolate raspberry cake balls, so that's the foundation that I will work with in order to lay out the rest of my cake balls. The next decision that we need to make is how we want to lay out the cake ball so that we attain the desired flavor. There's 3 components to our cake balls. The first one is cake, the second is frosting, and the third is the dunking chocolate. First things first, we need to decide what flavor cake we want to use for the base of our cake balls. Obviously today we're making dark chocolate raspberry cake, so I've decided chocolate cake. So I just grabbed a box of Devil's Food Cake out of the pantry. I do prefer Duncan Hines if I do use box cake. I would recommend it because I've had the most success using Duncan Hines. However, you can use any brand that you'd like, or you can use a homemade recipe. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna mix up our cake and get it in the oven so that we can get it cooling. You may notice that I am going to use a large baking sheet pan. The reasoning is because it will allow the cake to bake more quickly. It won't be in the oven quite as long. I have gone ahead and I have greased the pan and I have put parchment paper in the bottom. As you can tell, my parchment paper does not cover the entire bottom of my pan, but that's not a huge deal because we're not looking for perfection. We just need our cake baked because we're gonna crumble it up anyways. Decision that we need to make in order to lay out the flavoring of our cake pops is we need to decide what flavor of frosting we want to use. We can really use any flavor of frosting that we like, such as regular buttercream, flavored buttercream, or even cream cheese frosting. With flavors such as spice cake or red velvet cake, I really like to use cream cheese frosting because I think it gives it a nice finishing touch. And then with any of my chocolate cake pops, I really like to use chocolate buttercream because I think that it gives it more depth to the chocolate flavoring, and instead of fighting against the chocolate flavoring, it really works for it. So today, I'm going to be using some leftover chocolate buttercream that I had in the fridge. It is my homemade recipe. However, you do not have to use homemade frosting. You can use store-bought. Again, I do recommend using Duncan Hines, but you can use any flavor or brand of frosting that you'd like. Now that our cake is cool, we're now good to start putting it into our bowl. You can either use your stand mixer bowl or you can just put it into a regular mixing bowl and then you can mix it by hand. I prefer to use my hands when I mix it up so that I can feel the consistency as I mix so that it's not too dry and that I don't get too much frosting in it. Because if we get too much frosting in our cake pop mixture, then the cake pops won't be sturdy and they will fall off of the stick. So we don't want that. So that's why I like to just be extra careful and I like to use my hands. I'm not going to use the entire cake in order to make cake pop mixture. I'm only going to use about a quarter of it so that I can get around a dozen cake pops. You can usually get around 4 dozen cake pops out of it 1 cake mix. That will vary depending on what probably won't get the 4 dozen cake pops. You'll probably get a little bit less. And if you do make them smaller, then you should get more cake pops. So we don't have to make it anything pretty. We just need to dig in and get it scooped out. Our cake in the bowl, we'll want to crumble it up as much as we can. If you have the cake in your stand mixer, then you'll just turn the stand mixer on with your paddle attachment and let it crumble it as much as it can. Once we get our cake crumbled as much as we can, and it starts to kind of stick to itself when we squeeze it, we'll then want to start adding little bits of frosting at a time. We don't want to add too much frosting because if we do, as I said, the cake ball mixture can get too weak and saturated, and it will begin to fall off of the sticks. So I always like to get it kind of all in one giant cake ball, and then I start to add the frosting. This gives me the best idea of the consistency before I go ahead and add. And since this was leftover frosting in my fridge, I had used it to decorate a cake, so it was a little bit thinner than my normal frosting. So I'll definitely want to be careful not to add too much of it, as it already has a little bit more moisture to it than normal. I'll also want to take into consideration that I am using 1/4 of a mixture of cake. So that'll also lessen my amount of frosting. You'll definitely need less of the frosting than what you think you'll need, so don't overdo it. If you're using an entire cake in order to make your cake pop, then I would go ahead and I would use just a small one of these spoons filled with frosting to start off with, and then from there on I would only add about a half. So this is a good mixture right here. I can tell because it sticks together when I squeeze it, and it forms a really nice ball. The cake ball texture is nice and moist, but it is not like squishy when I squeeze it. It doesn't make any squishy sounds, it just presses together. And it presses together very easily. That's how I know it's not too dry. As you see, it kind of forms like a Play-Doh look when I squeeze it together, now that it's this consistency. So now I'll just push that all together, and we are going to roll out our cake balls now. So now that we have our cake pop base all mixed up, I went ahead and I wrapped it in saran wrap in order to make sure that it doesn't get dried out as I roll out the dough. Since I only have a little bit of mixture right now, it shouldn't be a huge deal, but if you use an entire cake mixture, then it will start to get dried out by the time you get to the end, and we don't want dried out cake balls. So I have it to where I can just peel it back a little bit to show what I need in order to scoop out the cake pop. So I like to use my cookie scoop in order to do my cake pops, in order to ensure that they're the same size. This keeps them nice and even, and I just think they look really nice. This is a 1 tablespoon measurement. I feel like this is a perfect measurement for a cake pop. So as you can see, I just reach in and I scoop it out. I like to use my hands and push it in, make sure that it's completely filled, and there's no air bubbles. Press it against my hand, and then I scoop it out into my hand. Then I just roll it out. Now a lot of people do different shapes of cake pops in order to get a particular design when they're finished. I just like to do little balls, but if you want to do like a heart shape, then you could then mold this into the shape of a heart. So the final flavor component that we need to decide on is our dunking chocolate. So today, since we're doing dark chocolate raspberry, I decided to use Ghirardelli's dark chocolate melting wafers. This is the best chocolate that I have worked with personally. I know I've tried a lot of different types of chocolate, and some of the brands tend to get lumpy, or they almost like have a separation happen with oils, and they just don't come out as clean in the end. So Ghirardelli is my go-to. Today we're going to use melting wafers because they're the simplest way to dunk items in chocolate. If you use any other chocolate that is not a wafer or designated just for melting wafers, then you will have to temper the chocolate, which will then be a longer process and you have to work much more quickly with it. For cake balls, I have found that the melting chocolate is the best route to go because it gives you the smoothest and most even finished cake pops. You may have noticed that we're making dark chocolate raspberry cake pops, but we haven't added any raspberry components yet. That's because we're going to add our raspberry flavoring to the chocolate shell around our cake pop. So today we are going to use raspberry flavoring oil. This is Loran Oils, and according to their suggestions, we should be using about 1/4 teaspoon to 1/2 teaspoon per pound of chocolate. Today I'm going to be using around 10 ounces of chocolate, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add 1/4 teaspoon of our raspberry oil to the chocolate discs when I melt them. Now that we've covered our cake balls and chilled them for 2 to 3 hours or overnight, or you are able to put them in the freezer for a half hour to an hour if you prefer that. This just gives our cake balls a little bit more stability so that they don't fall apart quite as easily, and it helps the chocolate to harden a little bit more quickly once we put it on. We'll be able to uncover these now, and the final step to making our cake pops is to dunk them. So we've gone ahead and we've melted our chocolate. We've done this by putting our chocolate discs in the microwave for 30-second increments and stirring them. And then once they start to melt a little bit, we then will need to put them in the microwave for about 10 to 15 seconds at a time. If you put them in the microwave for too long and don't stir them, then chocolate will burn and it becomes nearly impossible to dunk, and it just doesn't taste very well. I like to use my cake pop stand. I just bought this at Walmart, so it isn't anything difficult to find. You can also find them on Amazon and many other places. And then we'll need Cakepop Sticks. You can find these again at Walmart or in any cake decorating aisle or store. Before I bought my cake stand, I used to just use this foam chunk. It doesn't have to be any particular shape or super thick. As you can see, this is only like 1.5 inches thick, so it isn't too thick. If you do want to use a foam block, then just go ahead and you can cover it completely with plastic wrap. Or foil if you don't have plastic wrap, but plastic wrap does work a little bit better. This will help prevent the block from getting dirty and nasty, and it'll allow you to utilize it longer. And if one side gets a little holy and it doesn't work very well anymore, then you can just flip it over and use the other side. To cover our cake balls, we will just need to take one of our sticks and we will put a little bit of chocolate on it just so that it stays in the cake ball a little better. And we'll insert it. I like to go most of the way through, but not all the way to the top, probably about 3/4 of the way through, just to give it as much stability as possible. And then we will go ahead and just dunk it straight down. I like to wiggle it around to get rid of all air pockets. And then you'll just swirl and kind of swing it around a little bit, but gently, to get any of the excess chocolate off. We'll then just kind of spin it to get it upright. And then we will put it on our cake stand. So now we're going to drizzle our cake pops. I have gone in, I've melted some white chocolate discs, and I added some red food coloring. I like to use AmeriColor food coloring for things that I want a little bit deeper. I just started using this, but I do really like it. So now that it's colored red, I'm going to just drizzle it over the top with my spoon. As you can see, I put parchment paper underneath my stand. That's so that I can start my drizzle off on here, make sure that I've got a nice stream going, and then I just go all the way across. And I don't worry about making any mess on the board because that will just pop in the dishwasher. You can also add sprinkles to the top if you like. You can do that on top of the drizzle or just right after you dunk the cake ball. Now that you're all cake pop professionals, be sure to post photos of your cake pops and tag us on Facebook and Instagram. Also, before heading out, be sure to like this video, and you're also going to want to subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified next time we post. See you next Tuesday.